All right, welcome back to the Elias Makos Show in the third hour of the program. Of course, war happening right now. We see what's happening in Iran with U.S. and Israeli soldiers actively in that country and involved in military action. And recently, a listener reached out to us, and she has a son who is in the U.S. military. And it really got us thinking about just what do the parents of those who are involved in war, involved in military right now, what's going through their minds? So we're welcoming Christina onto the program. Hi, Christina. How are you this morning?
Good morning. Happy spring.
Happy spring, Christina. Thanks for reaching out, by the way. When we read your story, we certainly were interested. First things first, why don't you tell our listeners about your son? So he's 31 years old. What should our listeners know about your son, who is right now in the U.S. military?
Well, when he's specifically in the air, and he wanted to enter what he called the real Air Force.
So he's in the Air Force. He flies jets.
Yes.
When did he do that? When did he join the U.S. military?
When he was 15, he decided that that's the career path he wanted. It's on a trajectory that he wanted, which would eventually lead him into a space program. So he always said, I wanted to command rather than be a passenger. So he started to learn to fly at a very young age, at 9 years of age, and got hooked. And when it came to applying, he could apply to either. Actually, he could have applied to 3 countries, but he applied to the U.S.
Tell me a bit about your family. So is he's a U.S. citizen? Is it through you, through his father? Tell me about that.
Well, in order to enter into an academy, you do not have to be solely an American. However, in order to enter high ranks of security clearance, you must give up your other citizenship. So he is only an American now.
Got you. And so he's had a pretty successful career in the U.S. military. How does it feel for you? I'm sure your son has been deployed around the world before. He's deployed now. How does that feel like for a mother, knowing that her child could be in harm's way?
I come from a military family. My late husband's father served 4 years in the Second World War, and he did not come from a military family, but he went and he served, and I think those things influenced my son. Plus, he lives to live in the sky and do whatever in an airspace, whatever craft. So it was his dream, and it's at one point you say as a parent, it's not my life, it's my child's life. And when you see a child that's so determined and tells you, I've researched it, I know where I'm going, I know what I'm doing, you, like my husband at the time when he was alive, said, honey, all we can do is just sit back and watch him bloom.
How often do you expect updates from him? Like, what's the relationship like? On how often do you want to hear from him in order to know he's out of harm's way or he's doing well?
We communicate every day. Yeah, I need to hear from him when he's deployed. I need to hear from him every day. And
he's deployed right now.
Yep.
Let me ask you, because it's not lost on me that we hear a lot about the U.S. in this country, and we hear a lot of criticism about the U.S., the current U.S. administration, and the American military. You live in Montreal. You're a Montrealer. You must be surrounded by this stuff. How does that feel when you hear some of the criticism that's levied against the U.S. military and service members like your son?
You know what? I get nothing but praise. I get nothing but thank yous and praise, and we're praying for your son, and thank God for the U.S. Everybody in Canada knows that the U.S. will be there for us. That's why we took advantage of the situation, and we were always the mouse beside the elephant's legs, trembling. But we always knew the elephant could either crush us or defend us. And there's no question that the United States will always be there for us. That's why we slacked off with NATO, with all kinds of things, with building up our own security. And now we have a president in the United States that's, hard driven on that. And we just have to learn to cope with that. And hopefully the world will be a safer place eventually.
With everything that's happening in the war in Iran right now, and of course, the U.S. And Israeli militaries are focused on the air campaign primarily. Just what goes through your mind when we weren't in war a short while ago. Now we are. What goes through your mind given the current situation?
Well, I think about a week ago, people started saying to me, "We're in war," and like it had already been going on for like a week and a half. But then people around Montreal started saying, "We're in war. We're not sending troops, but there's a war going on. There's a major war going on." And there's the concern of the oil prices leading to higher amounts of money for Russia and what Russia can do. With U.S. troops being less in NATO right now and more focused in another region, there's concern about Russia wanting to take advantage or China and North Korea wanting to take over Taiwan. So there's world concerns going on that people who maybe are not politically or following what's going on in the world should wake up and realize that hopefully after all this, the world will be a safer place. And I'm very, very happy with the fact that the Americans have taken the hard stance that they have, that they're going to correct and hopefully bring into place a democratic government in Iran like it was, because the Iranian people need it and deserve it, and the whole world needs and deserves a stable Iran.
As the mother of someone who's a pilot in the U.S. Air Force, have you had any harrowing moments where you were worried, like you had genuine concerns that something had happened to your son? I don't know if you can. Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's been shot at, and luckily they missed. So
that did that happen recently, or is that just over one point in the career?
Fairly recently. Yeah, and he tells me about it after it's happened, or he sends whatever sensitive information he can legally send to inform me that I'm safe.
What do you think our listeners should know about those who serve in the U.S. military?
Sure, some of our listeners have grandparents that served in the Canadian military alongside our American brothers. And many of us are married in and out of America with Americans in our family. So we cannot say that we are just Canadians, although maybe some people who are new to Canada can say that. For hundreds of years, the Canadians and the Americans went over the border back and forth with each other, intermarried, had children, served. My own grandfather, late in his family, was born in America. Why? Because he served for the Americans. Left Quebec and went to serve for the Americans. And not my grandfather, but about 3 generations back from him. So we could go back to 1812. There were Quebecers that went and served for the Americans during the Civil War. And there's a lot of history that should be written up about the strength of the Canadians and our partnership with the Americans. And it's a privilege to live beside the United States as far as I'm concerned.
Christina, how are you holding up?
There are nights I don't sleep as well as other nights, but the minute I get his thumbs up, I know everything's good, and he's a great guy, and he's going to be safe.
Christina, thanks for talking to us about your son and sharing your thoughts and reaching out to us. I appreciate it.
Thank you. You're welcome.
That's Christina. She's a Montrealer. She's a mother, and she's got a son in the U.S. Air Force.
iHeartRadio is throwing it back.
2010s, the decade.
To the days of huge hits and unforgettable anthems. A non-stop stream of the biggest and best.
Drake, Rihanna, Beyonce, Katy, Gaga, The Weeknd,
and more. All your decade-defining favorites, all in one place.
Hi, it's Katy Perry.
Hey, it's Bruno Mars.
This is Kesha.
Find 2010's The Decade on the free iHeartRadio app. Preset the station so it's always one tap away.